Hey everybody, Brian Munz here, and welcome to our first conversation where we sit down and talk shop with technical people doing interesting things. And we're going to get into integrations, AI, where tech is actually headed, and try to cut through the hype and take a level-headed look at the industry. And my guest today is perfect for that. He is Andrew Purpura, CEO of Revecast, a Salesforce-native platform that helps sales and IT teams plan revenue, build integrations, and ship faster with AI. He ran this stuff hands-on, so I think he's going to have some good insights into what AI augmentation looks like in the real world. So, Andrew, welcome.
So what Revecast is, as you mentioned, a Salesforce-native product suite. We have products that we sell mostly into the IT and business users of Salesforce. Our lead product is called Revecast Orchestrate. This is a really relevant product for the conversation that we're having. It's an AI delivery platform that allows you to do prompt to building on the Salesforce ecosystem and essentially almost all technology stacks, from assessment of your IT stack all to scoping user stories to using AI to build the user stories. And it's fully compliant, HIPAA, FERPA compliance, regulated industry compliance. We have a professional services automation tool that helps IT departments with planning, utilization, planning out projects, time tracking, and everything you need to sort of manage delivery individuals. We have a form builder tool that integrates with our prompt to build orchestrate platform, where you can build application processes, donor forms, and any sort of form workflow that you need to build inside of Salesforce. And we have Revecast Connect as another one of our supporting products that is built on the Prismatic integration platform. And this is our integration tool, which allows us to do migrations and build integrations, and we can prompt to build the integrations. And it's really, really interesting because we can build the entire stack using prompt to build. You can take it all the way from a user story of what integration you want to build, and then when you take it into build, it can build not only create the fields in Salesforce, but build the integration in Prismatic, and then have a monitoring layer that's fully connected to AI helping you monitor the system. So it's really, really interesting. And so we have a suite of Salesforce products, and our focus is on AI augmentation for delivery.
Integrations typically have been kind of a difficult thing to manage, and obviously across several integrations and within a product. And obviously embedded iPaaS has been for that. But in terms of AI and its impact, of course, on software development, things like that, what was the big difference between before and after in terms of how you think about integrations and working with integrations in your platform?
That was sometimes some of the most expensive pieces of projects. So if you're a SaaS company and you need to, and you have a very valuable SaaS product, some of the concerns that you have when you're selling it into an organization is things like migrations. How are you going to get them out of their existing platform and into the new SaaS product? Those were sometimes really, really expensive. You end up, especially with a lot of legacy systems, you end up with really, really messy data. And then obviously the integrations, right? Like we sell our PSA tool let's say we sell into a professional services company or into an IT department. It almost always has to integrate with some other external system, Jira, QuickBooks. So when you're selling the SaaS product into these customers, you have to have a way to have an integration, have a migration, and the migration specifically could be detrimental to selling it. And then they used to be very, very expensive. Now, how that's changed with prompt to building is it's essentially completely changed everything. How quickly we can build migrations and integrations now using AI augmented technology it essentially isn't a problem anymore. So we don't have the problem of how expensive is this migration going to be to get the customer onto our platform. We can do AI augmentation with Prismatic to build a migration or to build an integration to that third-party system. And I have, really good examples where we had a federated system that had 26 different sub companies. They're essentially companies, but they're in a federated system. And how you would, integrate their different software platforms, and do the migration for every single one of them. And it completely changes where we go into those sort of situations where it may have been $1 million to do something like that just a few years ago. And now we look at that as we're not even afraid of it. And it may be something that we do for a very minimal cost now because we can do it so quickly.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's interesting because you keep using the word AI augmentation, which is a term I really like because it kind of shows a practical nature to the approach, right? It's not just like dropping AI like a brick onto things and expecting it to work. And so you even mentioned before some of your product has to be HIPAA compliant, which is, obviously a big deal because that's something where if you mess up, you don't just lose customers, you could lose quite a bit of money and get into quite a bit of trouble. And so how do you approach the guardrails and making sure while you're using AI that it's doing the right thing and that you're not putting yourself at risk or things like that? Because this is a topic that comes up a lot in terms of people just saying, well, I just throw AI at it and it does it, and then I sit on a beach somewhere, as compared to how do you make sure that it's being properly used in this way?
Yeah. So when you use AI augmentation, we have to come to it with a realistic stance. So there's a lot of different camps when it comes to AI, to how AI can be used. A lot of it is hype. So like you have to be careful of when people say that it can literally do everything for you. You have to be careful of that because there are still things that it can do that are unpredictable. But there's also people who think it's it's nowhere near where it currently sits. And those people may not understand how far the AI augmentation has come. And so the reality is the AI augmentation is very, very good at doing these types of activities. Building an integration in Prismatic, as an example, it is very good at doing that. And I was surprised by how good it was when I first tried to do this. But you have to come at it with an expectation of what is going to happen when you do it and how you have to be a prompt engineer working with it. When you're working with AI augmentation, you can't expect that what it produces is perfect when you're the first time that you prompt something into it. So let's say you go to build an integration, you give it a mapping. You can't just expect that what's come out of it is perfect. You still have to validate what's come out of it, and you possibly have to iterate on it. So when we're training new people to use AI augmentation, it's about setting an expectation of how do you interact with AI when it's helping you do the work. It is going to make you significantly faster at doing the work, but you're going to have to validate what it's created, and you're going to have to test it, and you're going to have to iterate potentially on it. And that's kind of similar to how you would work if you have a development team, right? Like you may have like an architect who's designing something and then a developer who goes and builds it. And then when they go to review it, you may find an issue in it, and then you have to iterate over it again until you get it correct. It's a very similar if you look at it from that perspective. And so that's kind of how we have had governance over it from how we interact with it when we're using it to develop and in our processes. We have to set an expectation of what's going to come out of it and how you have to have a human in the loop who's validating the output.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a key point too, because you hear human in the loop a lot, but I think something that is often lost is that what's being done is a developer task, right? So a developer task means that you've got to test, you've got to do code reviews, you got to do all of this other stuff that a developer do. And so I think if the expectation is it comes in and pops out the other side and you're a non-technical person and it's going to be perfect, that's an unreasonable expectation because
Right.
you need to iterate. And the thing that I think a lot of people miss though is if you have to take 3 tries at this thing as a developer and it takes a day instead of a week, I mean, what's the downside there, right?
Right. I mean, the iteration is much faster. So like
Right.
You 100%. What you're saying is the experience that we have.
In terms of that acceleration of before and after AI, and because Prismatic, we built the skills which tried to create those guardrails. So it's not just it has skills, and there's MCP, and there's these other concepts that help to give you a better chance. But what was your kind of experience in starting to build these integrations using AI that has a specific purpose in the way that it did for integrations? What's the learning process like, or how do you then recalibrate sort of your workflow to it?
So what was my learning like? So the first time I tried to do this, I tried doing it in Claude Code. And ironically, I pointed it at the Prismatic documentation and I asked it to help me get started. I mean, I honestly just asked the AI to help me get started, and it downloaded everything it needed for me to get going, and sort of walked me through it in Claude Code. The use case I used was simple but messy, right? So it was something that I could control. In my situation, I took two Salesforce orbs that are running two separate businesses in them. And I wanted to integrate just opportunities, leads, accounts, etc. Now that seems simple, but even though it was similar structure, similar database type of database, it was messy data, right? Where we would have to map the data together. And so I wanted to see what that process would look like doing augmentation. I actually found it to be much better than I was expecting when I did it. It was actually very simple to use. It took me very little time, probably less than 10 minutes to set up Prismatic to work in Claude Code. And then I worked through the integration. It took me like probably hours to create that integration, where that probably would have, in the past, if you're in a tool where you're dragging and dropping or building an ETL type of integration like that, it would probably take you about a day to get it right, because you got to get all the mappings right. You got to then build out the flow of how everything's going to function. It's probably about a day, and it took me maybe a couple of hours from start to finish, not even having it installed and using it before. And so after that experience, I was like essentially sold on this concept. I had to test it out to see if it was going to work. I asked someone else on my team to do it, who was even less technical, and to see if it was going to be as easy for them to do that situation. And they had the exact same experience as me. It just became, how do I implement this into the company in a way that's sellable within the situations that we sell to, right? So at that point, you can't sit on that technology and not provide it to customers. And so for me, it was, how do we roll this out? And so then I had to start working through the compliance situations, and not on the integration side, but in prompt to building, right? So like if you're using things like Claude Code and you may be doing mappings of data, how do you work through that compliance that customers might need for regulated industries? Because that is a common industry that we sell into.
Yeah. And regulated industries is a whole ball of wax that you hear about quite a bit, obviously, like I said before, especially around AI. And there's a lot of hesitation with it and things like that. But in general, if, we had mentioned before this hype cycle and people making broad statements, generally, I think that a more practical and measured view, moderation kind of moderate view is the way to go. But if you were to give advice or go back in time, in first kind of engaging with AI, not just with Prismatic, but in general, how would you maybe do things different? What advice would you give companies? Because there's, everybody has been touched by this and are trying to figure out how to bring it in, and you see the mistakes and you see people that aren't moving at all.
I would say that you have to have more of like an R&D type of mentality now. You have to start moving and you have to start figuring out how to do this in your organization, because what happens when you start doing this sort of AI augmentation in your teams, the people that adopt it really well end up being like 15 people, or potentially more. And the amount of productivity that it creates is not an exaggeration for the people that adopt it well. And there's certain people that just like grab onto it and they really, really adopt it. And so my advice would be that you definitely need to move in some capacity in a direction that's moving in this way. If you're choosing products now, and I've actually wrote an article recently about this for some of the legacy systems of Salesforce. AI is kind of everywhere, right? So like when you're in a company now, you may not be looking at doing AI for a certain tool or a certain process, but you don't necessarily want to block yourself later in that process. So when you're evaluating products now, you have to say to yourself, is this going to be AI accessible, right? Do they have APIs that are accessible? Do they have MCP layers that are accessible? So even if you aren't going to move this quickly in this direction, you don't want to block yourself from doing that in the future. And so you really need to evaluate if if the technology that you're looking at is going to have that possibility now.
So yeah, like one thing too, I was wondering is a lot of people in engineering, whether it's leadership or developers themselves, this can be kind of it can be, of course, a dicey topic, but beyond that, I think a lot of tech leaders struggle to figure out how to bring this topic up and how to encourage the developers to incorporate it into their workflows while still holding on to those developer skills that they have. Obviously, developers aren't going to be touching as much code as before. It kind of goes back to the other question of incorporating it, but how you, from a management level and a personnel level, bring that into the fold and get everyone to kind of incorporate it into their workflows, if that makes sense.
That topic specifically has a lot of things that it brings up in my mind. One of the issues I want to make sure to mention is that there's kind of a problem of shadow AI. So as you're rolling it out within an organization, if you want to have standardization, you sometimes have shadow AI usage. So one of the things that you really need to do is you need to have an AI tool that your company is supporting, right? So you sort of have to say, this is what our company supports as an AI strategy and in the tools that we're going to use as a company. Because if you don't identify that, then what ends up happening is you have shadow AI usage within the organization. And just to be very honest, in this point in 2026, your employees are using AI, whether you've given it to them or not. And if you haven't given them a place to do it that you have evaluated and want to do it with, they're going to be using it on personal accounts. They're going to be copying and pasting it into things. That's been a huge problem in the regulated industries. There has been articles that have come out in the last year or so that have talked about shadow AI usage in organizations. It is now one of the leading causes of data breaches within organizations. So having an opinion about this in an organization as a CIO is really, really important. They're not at a point now where where you just say you can't have a role where you don't use it. It's better to have a role where you can, but this is the safe place to do it. When rolling it out, you do have a situation where some of the users adopt it very strongly and hold have a really opinionated about it being amazing. So some of them will just think it's the best thing that's ever happened to them, even developers, and they love how much more work they can get done. And you will have people that will resist it as an organization. And the way that we've addressed that is being very honest with our employees about how we view it's going to impact their careers, what we believe the AI is going to do within their job sets and how their roles may evolve. Being very transparent and honest about that so that they have an understanding of how their job may change. We've rolled out training and groups of users to start doing it together so that they can sort of learn from each other. We've rolled out processes, right? So orchestrate was one of the was originally how we were going to roll it out to our team, and then we realized we need to give this to customers also. And so we built very specific process of how we are going to use AI in our development, in our delivery, etc. So that's some of the advice that I can give to people that may roll this out in their organization.
Right. So basically, the worst thing you can do is by kind of tap dancing around it, as compared to saying, right, this is what it is and this is our perspective on it. And I think you do see that companies a lot more nowadays, where they're just, especially in hiring processes, are saying, here's our perspective on AI. And so this is what we expect. Because I think also people coming in want to know, is this going to be all in, or is this going to be a person in the loop kind of situation? So I think that's actually really good advice. And in that, on that perspective, I just kind of wanted to give an opportunity for a moment where, like you said, you saw not only how it was going to accelerate development, but it actually having an effect to your customer base and out in the world and selling your product and things like that. Just the impact that could have on the product in general, whether it's accelerating, feature releases or pivoting and things like that.
Both integrations now and forms and working with our PSA tool, all of it has prompt to build functionality now that we have created specialized skills, very similar to the way Prismatic is doing it for integrations. And we utilize Prismatics in our Connect product that uses Prismatic. And so our customers, if they need an integration with the system, can prompt to build that integration. We've delivered that to our customers now. So I can't imagine working in any other way. So like when we get a new customer, we can obviously help them quickly get onto the platform and build the immediate things that they need, help them with the migrations. But if they need to maintain that, as an example, and they need to make changes, giving them the ability to do prompt to build and teaching them how to fish is very, very valuable. And it gives us an edge when we're selling our products into the market.
Yeah, exactly. And that's huge in terms of, cutting down on support and just, making it so they don't have to call you up every time, because obviously you save money when that's the case, but they do too. And they don't have to sit there and wait and get frustrated. So you're kind of putting some of the power in their hands, which obviously adds some complexity, like we mentioned earlier, around keeping the guardrails. But of course, that's an ideal situation. Like you said, you're teaching them to fish.
Yeah. I mean, I got to bring this up because this is really, really cool. But we even have a situation where we have an integration that has monitoring. So we use the monitoring layers of Prismatic on an integration. And when there's an error if there's an error that happens, or maybe there's an edge case, when we built an integration, we actually have one that's doing this right now, where it sends the error message to a REST API of our prompt to build tool. And it goes into a design session that evaluates what happened. And so you could wake up in the morning and you have in your Slack a message in your Slack that tells you what, the monitoring hit something. This is what happened. Here's a design to fix it. And you can then go into the AI tools and go right into a build session and go and fix it, stage it into a development instance, and then start testing it. You can go directly from the monitoring layer to the design and fixing of it. And so that's a human in the loop. That's almost an autonomous human in the loop situation. And I had to bring that up because that's where we are now. Like and we're doing that more and more and more, if customers can have that, managed services of the product decreases, the ability to solve situations really quickly when they happen. That's kind of a game changer.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I hadn't even thought about that possibility of where, like you said, it's by the time you even see it, there's a fix in the works. And in that way, it's not just accelerating the development, it's accelerating your response to it. And it's enabling you to basically, when something fails, not only do you know about it And in the old days, you'd get in the old days, you get like a pager or a text or a phone call saying this thing broke, where that stuff still happens, obviously. But in this case, it's going to be, there's a critical error. Here's what I think, here's what the agent thinks should be done. That person can then, of course, address it first thing in the morning. So
that really helps when you release new things as well, right? Like especially if you can have a process that has kind of a self-improvement loop like that. When you release new integrations, new forms, new agents, if you're building an agent itself, we have that self-improvement loop on agents as well. And so if you have a self-improvement loop like that, that means what you built today is going to be better in a month, because if you build in that monitoring layer, which Prismatic is nice because it has that monitoring out of the box as a feature. If you have that monitoring layer and you can send it, and you use that into AI augmentation tools, it's kind of like a self-improvement loop.
Right, which a lot of people had thought AI was, which was a self-improvement loop where it would learn from its mistakes, which it doesn't necessarily do, obviously, now that we know about models and things. But this is using AI to have a self-improvement loop based on your specific product situation, which is a very, very cool use case. Not one I had heard of before. But so I could obviously talk about this all day, but I'll have to restrain myself. But it's been awesome talking to you, because you have all kinds of interesting insights and you have real world usage of AI. But I definitely thank you for joining us. It's been great to talk to you.
Awesome. You too, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks. And for everyone that joined us, thanks for joining, and keep your eye out for future conversations. Thanks.